All right, time to turn our attention to the weekend's rugby. We have the Pro 14 finalists lined up. It is going to be Leinster against Ulster this weekend. Alan Quinlan, good morning.
Morning, lads. How are you?
We will start with one of the losers from the weekend, though. Let's get your Munster hat in your head straight away. Where does Friday night rank in terms of the biggest Munster disappointments in recent seasons?
Oh, it's right up there, Owen. I think it's probably the manner of the defeat and the frustration of the mistakes and the approach, really. I suppose the conditions beforehand probably didn't help the way Munster were going to play. I thought in the first game, they showed a lot of ambition. They passed the ball far more. They tried to run and be more expansive. And when you lose a game, it looks way worse. And unfortunately, their set piece, their line-out let them down. And a lot of areas of the game just were quite frustrating to watch. The players will know that themselves. And a lot of people online, Munster fans, were very, very disappointed. And they probably ranked this one right up there because there was a fair bit of optimism and hope that maybe they could close that gap on a fantastic Leinster side.
The fact of the matter is, Alan, that Munster did not play anywhere close to the level of the ability of the players that they have on the pitch. This is a fairly gilded squad. This is a strong backline. I mean, the additions they have made have been outstanding, and they should be outstanding. That is probably the biggest frustration, I'd imagine, from a Munster perspective, that they were nowhere near the level that they should be collectively.
Yeah, I think when you go off the field and you're well beaten, Leinster probably could have won the game by more. They didn't have clear-cut chances, Leinster, but they were the dominant side and they managed the game so well, the tempo of the game. And I suppose the kicks from JJ Hanrahan didn't help in the second half, but every time Munster got into a good area, they made a mistake or Leinster defended very, very well. And that shows the difference between the two sides. And, the players will be very frustrated. I think they looked lethargic. They looked slow, cumbersome at times. And it's a hard one for them to swallow. And for the Munster fans, you look at the different approach. And I know there's probably a mitigating factor in the greasy conditions. Munster kicked the ball 28 times. Leinster kicked it 25 times. And if you go back to the first game, Munster kicked it 20 times. Leinster kicked it 21 times. So Munster increased the kicks by 8 and Leinster increased theirs by 4. So Leinster kicked a fair bit of ball as well. But when you're 7 points up, 10 points up in a game like that, well, you can kick the leather off the ball. Gibson Park kicked it a lot, Luke McGrath. It doesn't matter. You're actually frustrating the opposition. Their kick chase was a lot better. Munster's wasn't as good. They got a lot of return in the first game from those box kicks, and it just didn't work. Leinster retreated back very well, and they escorted players back into those dangerous areas. And Jordan Larmour claimed a few early balls, and that gave him confidence. And Munster didn't have any other ideas. So that's a big concern. In the first game as well, Munster passed the ball 140 times on. They passed it 82 times last Friday night. That's a significant drop. And I know you can make an excuse for the conditions, but they obviously reverted to type. They thought they could put the squeeze on Leinster, forced them into mistakes. There was a couple of scrums there where they tried to keep the ball in the scrum. When you were Damien Dialende and Chris Farrell in the centre, who are fantastic players, just get them the bloody ball quickly. Let them run at the opposition. Let them test themselves and give them a focal point to attack off, try and generate quick ball off that and play. And too often it was slow and, as I said, reverted to tight box kicks that were inaccurate from Conor Murray.
Who's making those decisions, Alan? Is that coaches when they see the rain, or the players on the pitch go and let's just keep this tight for a while?
No, I think it's a mixture of both, and people have asked me this over the weekend. Well, who's telling them to do this? Obviously, they have a game plan, and I suppose for these 3 or 4 weeks that they were hoping to get themselves into a final, they weren't going to drastically try and change everything. It's a bit like the Republic of Ireland. You change too much too quickly and you come unstuck. They're back to their old ways a little bit of trying to pressurise the opposition and play a kicking game. Kicking game is absolutely vital in the modern game, because if you play out of your own half too much, there's too much energy exerted. Sometimes you're going nowhere, you make a mistake, you cough up a penalty. So every team kicks the ball a lot more now in the modern game. I remember England beat France in Twickenham a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. They kicked the ball 44 times. They scored 7 tries. They won convincingly. They blew France away. Kicked it 44 times. Nobody left the stadium that day thinking, well, that was a really negative approach from England, because their kicks were good. They were accurate. There was kick passes. There was grubbers put in behind the opposition. There was kicks from the fly half up in the air. Munster just keep kicking off Conor Murray, and everybody knows they're going to do this. The opposition know they're going to do it, and if they catch the ball, defend it well, retreat the way they did the other night, and executed the catch well, you just feel Munster don't have an answer, and on the field leadership is an issue. Making those kind of decisions on the field need to be a lot better. You can have a template out there, and I've always said this as a player, and I had it as a player myself. You've got to adapt to the conditions and the scoreboard. If Munster are 10 points up, Ger, they can kick the ball dead every single time, and no Munster fan would complain about it. Do you know what? Afterwards, they'll say, oh, that's brilliant, because Munster just frustrated the life out of the opposition. But you're kicking the ball away when you're 10 points down. Johnny Sexton gets a penalty at 67 minutes, and I think there was 2 or 3 rucks that were possibly, they were relatively quick. Munster could have played off him. It was trying to throw caution to the wind there. The players got to take ownership of that and just play. I'd rather give away another try than lose in the manner they did. Now, it's easy for me to say, but I think, you know, it's incredibly frustrating to watch this time after time after time. You know, being close in matches and being, you know, having an approach like that is fine, but you've got to get results. And if you win the game, it doesn't matter. But when you lose the game, you look at it. You look at the Munster pack last Friday night. They gained 17 metres. 8 forwards who started gained 17 metres. Leinster gained 103 for their forwards. Now, Quinlan had 52 of those metres and 14 carries. But, you know, for a pack of forwards to gain 17 metres, they're running into brick walls. Now, some of that is down to brilliant Leinster defence, aggression, chop tackles. Will Connors was really good at that, of course, and that's why he was picked. But no other leadership on the field, and no other or kind of control or decisions to, you know, you've got Andrew Conway and Keith Earls in the wings. Yeah,
does Johan van Graan not need to take some of the blame here as well, Alan? Like, I mean, if we're talking about the players needing to take responsibility, and we're wondering where the decision-making is coming from off the field, surely the head coach that's been there for 3 years, and Munster are still arriving at a place where they're giving off the impression that they don't have a single attacking plan outside of Conor Murray box-kicking repetitively, surely a lot of that blame has to rest with the coaching team, in fairness, and particularly with the head coach.
Well, they do have an attacking plan, and you saw it in the first game, the way they played. I thought their approach in that first Leinster game was brilliant. And I give you one prime example. The first try that Andrew Conway scored in that match, Munster were picking and jamming at the line. Normally, they just keep doing that until they get the score, or else they turn it over or knock it on. But they identified the opportunity to move it quickly and look for the space. So I think their approach and their ambition to change is definitely there. Of course, Johan van Graan has got to take ownership of that, because when you lose these games and you lose them in that manner, he's got to take control of that and take responsibility. So is Stephen Larkham. You know, where was Stephen Larkham's imprint in that? If I was the backs coach and I had Dialinde, Farrell, Conway and Earls, I'd be trying to put pressure on the forwards coach or the forwards pack to deliver me good ball. I want my back line to get the ball in the hands, get some space on it. You know, too often, it's particularly the other night, the ball was coming out way too slow. No matter who you have in the centres or who you have, you've no time and space, and you got to get the ball in Dialinde's hands earlier. You got to give him a little bit of space. Chris Farrell, and they showed that in the first game. They showed they could do it. So I think the players, in a sense, of course, if Munster score and they're the ones ahead, like I said, you can kick the ball all day long. But their kick chase wasn't good enough. Their accuracy wasn't good enough. And they've got to change that in the field, particularly when you're 10 points down. You've got to say, right, let's do something different. Let's just throw caution to the wind. Let's try and offload the ball. Let's just throw the ball wide. and they don't seem to be able to make those kind of decisions on the field. So leadership is and vision of space is a problem, and too many players not making carries, not fronting up. Like I said, 17 metres for the forward pack. They've got to take ownership of that this morning, or when they look back in the video and say, well, where are the carries? Where are the hard yards? I'm not talking about metres gained, because sometimes you don't make metres, but you just have to carry and exhaust the opposition, make them tackle and keep hammering away, and eventually there'll be a little bit of space, there'll be time to move it. But the control then from the 9 and 10, Conor Murray and JJ Hanrahan, wasn't great, and they're probably your big key decision makers on the field who make those decisions. But like I said, 10 points down, Conor Murray kicked the ball back into a ruck at one stage where slowed the whole game down to box kick again. It's very, very difficult at times to play, and you're playing against such a good Leinster side who are incredibly abrasive. They were the ones who probably flipped the aggression stakes right over from the first game, where they were the ones who were really frustrated, Munster. And in fairness, this is probably harder to watch because the Munster players, are they good enough? Some of them, are they good enough? That's the reality. You've got to ask that question. They've got to ask it themselves. But their effort levels, their endeavour and their commitment was second to none. They scrambled back so many times.
Which players are we talking here that aren't good enough?
Well, if you look at the players who are not, Munster don't have enough internationals on. So if you want to win Pro 14s and beat Leinster and win European Cups, you've got to get more guys in the international team. You can name them yourself. Munster have probably 4 or 5 that are involved with the international squad. The other players are, there's a vast amount of them who are not, so Munster have got to bring in young players. I think the front row didn't play well. Tadhg Byrne had a few moments. Billy Holland. The front 5 didn't perform the other night as a unit. They didn't impose themselves. And, I played in the back row for so long. And if you're front 5, you rely on your front 5 to make those hard yards, to put in the tackles, to make the carries, to carry the shitty ball at times, that the back row can then get a little bit of space to maybe put a bit of evasion on, link up with their back line. And that's just a reality. Now, in saying this, and Leinster people will probably say it's a strange comment, but Leinster were poor enough themselves the other night. They'll look at their own performance and say it was a terrible game. They didn't create a huge amount. They certainly had moments where they had more enthusiasm, more energy, more intensity than Munster. But I give credit to Munster in fairness. They stayed in the fight and they kept scrapping away. And, if JJ Hanrahan gets the 2 kicks, it's always ifs and buts, unfortunately, at the moment. And if he gets the 2 kicks, maybe it's a little bit different. There was a maul at the end that Quinlan pulled down. It's too late, though. Munster have to look at themselves here, and the players have to take responsibility, and the coaches as well. So there's probably time for a little bit of change where some of the young players have to come in and be given the opportunity in the Pro 14. But Leinster were brilliant. We can't take away that. I didn't want to come on here this morning focusing on Munster's faults. I know that's probably more of a story, but I just think you got to give Leinster massive credit for their ability to be composed, to frustrate the opposition themselves. They can dog it out any which way, Leinster as well. Munster's accuracy, if it was a little bit better, if it's a 1-score game in the last 10 minutes, well then, you can up the ante and you can up the pace of the game and you can have a real crack. But the 2 scores, it just looked deflated. And, that lack of leadership on the field and control needs to be a lot better. And, look, there is some good young players. I've said this a few times, and they probably need to be introduced now and given their opportunity for the start of the Pro 14.
The trouble with new players is that if you're a coaching ticket where you feel like there's a bit of pressure on you, which I'm sure Johan van Graan will feel, then you're unlikely to introduce new young players because you'll feel like you need to win games. And you end up in this kind of trap scenario where you end up picking the out lads because you know that they're going to get you to a certain level and you hope that the young lads are going to come through. But ultimately, the young lads don't get enough experience to actually win these big games eventually. So I don't know if he does bravely pick a new team at the start of the new Pro 14 season, that'll be great, and maybe the internationals will help with that. Can we talk a bit about the decision making then? Because obviously the 8 has to carry a lot of responsibility for that because it's a key position. 9, as you've said, But 10, is JJ Hanrahan up to it at this level at the moment? Like it looks like he had a big opportunity here to make the claim and the position his own for the next 6 months, and he's just not quite at the level that he needs to be.
No, I think just quickly on the changes that need to be made. Part of their plan, Munster, for this block, and it's understandable, was because they didn't have all the academy players in with them. You know, they were in two kind of separate bubbles. There was a couple of weeks ago where the COVID cases, there was a suspected COVID case. A lot of the academy guys were kind of ruled away and pushed away and kept in their own bubbles. So the likes of John Hodnett, Jack O'Sullivan, you know, Thomas Ahern, Keenan Knox, Liam Coombs, Gavin Coombs, all these guys, you know, they will come into the side. And that's not, won't be Johan van Graan panic making changes for the sake of it. These guys were going to be transitioned in anyway. A lot of them had injuries and for different reasons. So they will get their opportunities. And that's why, you know, Munster, I'd be enthusiastic when these guys come in. And there's still a lot of good players there. And there's a lot of guys who can perform at that level. I'm not writing off players. But I just think when you come to semi-finals and finals, you need that extra quality. You need that depth. And that's something that, you know, unfortunately, talking about JJ, it looks bad for him. The performance wasn't good. The missed kicks, the control, the kicking game, the direction, and it comes from your 10, you know. And it's been a problem for Munster. You know, Carberry's injury is someone said to me last week that Joey Carberry's injury is bigger than Snyman's injury, and I think it is. You know, Dave Kilcoyne is missing, and Klein as well, that give him an extra bit of strength. Leinster had their own injuries for sure. Tyke Furlong, James Ryan, Dan Levy. There's probably a few more as well, but they have far more depth. Munster were badly hit with those injuries, but the depth in the 10 slot is a problem. And, you know, JJ didn't play well, and he made mistakes, and he made errors and missed those vital kicks. And they're the ones you got to nail in the big games, and he's got to take ownership for that. So, you know, you've got to see Jack Crowley, Ben Healy, Jake Flannery. There's three really good, young, promising players there. They've got to get some game time and give them a chance at it, and hope Carberry transitions back into the side as well.
But I think that obviously the 10, when you miss kicks, is going to be a subject for conversation. But the fact that Ian Madigan comes along 24 hours later and nails a match winner, it's like maybe Munster should have gone for Madigan, and it would have been a good idea to add him to the squad, considering he was available and so readily available over the last while. Maybe that's a stupid thing to be pointing out, because, you know, maybe he wasn't going to go there, and maybe they weren't even in for him. But like, until you find the solution at 10, you're always looking for a 10.
Yeah, and the JJ's kicked really well this year, and he's probably looked more composed in some performances this year and been pretty consistent. But it's the big games. It's the round sixes away to Racing. It's you know, semi-finals, finals over the years. They're the games you need big temperaments, composure, a real steel about you. And unfortunately for JJ, you know, he just did. It wasn't his night the other night, and it's an issue for him, and it's an issue for Munster. So it's hard to single out one guy. I think, you know, he's playing behind a pack as well that are not imposing themselves. So he can argue that point out, but the kicks, they can happen anyone, you know. But they're just significant moments, and he's a confidence player, and he looks like he drains of that confidence in some of these big moments. And unfortunately, he's got to take ownership of that as well, and Munster have as well. But aside from whether JJ played well or not, you know, he's 31. He's been around a long time. They've got to bring in these young out halves now. I think that, you know, Jack Crowley for me, Healy and Flannery are really, really exciting young players. John Hodnett is a really, really exciting player. Jack O'Sullivan, Gavin Coombs, Thomas Ahern, I spoke about him a few weeks ago. They've got to find a way now to bring these players in and give them opportunities, and hopefully that will happen. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, to beat Leinster, I said this last week, you've got to have a 9.5 out of 10. Player ratings in the Munster players after the weekend, and they're 4s and 5s at best, you know, and that's just not good enough. It's not taking control, being aggressive. like I said, the effort level was there, and in fairness, they scrambled back so many times. Even when Leinster kind of broke out and they forced Leinster to knock the ball on, they turned ball over to break down. But they've just got to expand their minds a little bit and find that little bit of vision to play a different brand. Of course, in the wet, shitty nights, kick the ball all you like. You know, you're going to have to do that, make those one-out carries, but you've got to have some vision on the field. And it's probably frustrating because, you know, you look at the first game, 27-25, Munster had even created more opportunities. They scored some brilliant tries, so they can do it, and it's there.
Yeah.
But look, in crucial areas, you know, Leinster have Leinster, I'll give you an example. Leinster have an international front row out the other night. You know, Munster's front row is not as powerful as that. You know, they've got to impose themselves. They've got to make those big carries, and sometimes it's down to a bit of quality as well. And Leinster had that, and they have it in loads of it. So it's not a major one, but going right back to what you asked me to start, this one is right up there with probably the most disappointing loss.
Just on Ian Madigan, he's been mentioned there a moment ago. How impressed, if you're contrasting that Munster performance with that Ulster performance, with how well able Ulster were to get the job done on Saturday night, the stones shown by Ian Madigan to get the job done for them, and how he might work his way into contention in the starting 15 this weekend. But as a wider point, Alan, how impressed are you by the way Ulster executed on Saturday night?
Very impressed, because I was critical of them, particularly in that opening game against Connacht. Connacht should have won that game by more. Ulster were really poor. They were quite poor against Leinster as well, a second-string Leinster side. So I just thought it was going to be difficult for them going over there to try and turn it on and get a result against Edinburgh. Edinburgh have a lot of internationals on their side. They were beaten by Glasgow the week before. Few question marks about. I thought they were better than they actually showed the other night. They lacked a real bit of control when they were 19. They were 12-0 up first, and then when they were 19-7, I just thought that was the time to kill the game off. And credit to Ulster, you know, they were so brave in their approach. I thought Albie Mattison was brilliant when he came on. He just really, really tried to put pace in the game and make breaks himself and offload. And they lost the ball a few times, and you kind of went, that was such a pity. Edinburgh are going to clear their lines now. But the way they kept going was just amazing. Alan O'Connor didn't really get many mentions. I just thought his tackling was phenomenal. Sean Reedy really came off the bench. Coetzee was brilliant. And if they do that, Ulster's biggest problem is consistency. Can they turn up at the weekend now against Leinster and bring the same intensity? It was a poor first half, but that response from Ulster showed incredible character. And they're the kind of games we've seen Ulster have some of those games in the last number of years, but then they go back to kind of drab performances at times. And Madigan showed real balls, not just to get the penalty at the end, but to get the conversion from John Andrews' try was a great strike. The penalty at the end, funnily enough, you might sound strange, but it's a free shot. It's not to win the game. If he misses, they lose. They're the ones. It's a free shot. But, you know, he is a big game player. He loves that bit of pressure. And that's what we're talking about, JJ Hanrahan. That pressure seems to get to him, whereas someone like Madigan revels in that pressure. And that's a mindset thing, you know. That's where you become really strong. And you know, I just felt, and I'm sure many people felt, I felt he was going to get it. He's just the kind of fella who has that bit of swagger. And I felt he was going to get the kick, and it was brilliantly executed. Massive win for Ulster, because they've been poor in the last few weeks, and they're in a final now. They have the bragging rights. They have a chance to have a go at Leinster, and we saw from that European game last year that they caused Leinster a few problems, but it's a massive lift for them, because they can take a lot out of this last couple of weeks now, and those bad performances are forgotten about. Whereas, you know, Munster, a really good performance against Ulster, good win against Connacht, and then you finish in that negative. So it can change very, very quickly, you know. And Ulster, I thought they were fantastic. The last 20, 25 minutes, they were brilliant. And And they played with a real ambition and bravery. And that's what you want to see. And that's what I was trying to say about the Munster stuff. Just throw caution to the wind. And they had a real go. And you know, the Rob Little try was fantastic score. So they were brilliant and they deserved to be there.
It's amazing as well when you talk about the pressure that gets to certain people, and sometimes we big up this idea that certain players have been written off in the build-up to a game, but there was a lot of pressure put on the likes of Jordan Larmour in a Leinster jersey going into last week. There was questions about whether or not Rob Kearney would start in front of Jordan Larmour, and of course that would naturally raise the question of, do we continue with Larmour as Ireland's 15, considering it seemed to have gone so well before lockdown? He answered pretty much all those questions in the first few minutes on Saturday night or on Friday night. And that just really shows, again, if you're talking about the balls that Ian Madigan showed, what Jordan Larmour showed in responding to that criticism very, very well on Friday night is something else.
Yeah, he and, you know, when you're under pressure for a previous game, whether it be missing tackles, missing kicks, not finishing opportunities, if you start well the next game, well, that just all drifts away because you get a huge boost, a surge of confidence from that. And Larmour got that the other night. But you look back at those kicks on and the chase wasn't as good. There's no way the same kind of contest. The accuracy wasn't as good. And what Leinster did so much better in this game is their escorts back and protecting him in front. Sometimes, and we see it a lot in a lot of games, when it's done well, it's effectively it's obstruction. It's blocking players from running through. But nobody gets pulled for it really anymore unless you take out a player. And England did it so well to Ireland the last couple of times they've played them, in taking away Ireland's kicking game. So the enthusiasm and the energy to get up there and contest wasn't the same for Munster. And maybe that was something to do with the 5-day turnaround. But when you start like that, you get a huge surge of confidence. And he's someone who wasn't daunted by it. I just get the feeling that, you know, he knew himself, and players, good players, know that, and they show a determination to put it right. So he did that brilliantly. And like I say, sometimes it's the body language of players. You know that they're gonna respond, and Larmour did, and Madigan did, and sometimes that's the difference in winning those critical moments in matches.
Owen Farrell's tackle technique has finally caught up with him, Alan.
Yeah, it was an horrific tackle. And you know, my bugbear for this, Ger, is when players say, well, it wasn't intentional, and you know, he dipped and there's mitigating factors. You know, when you're flying out of the line or in open play like that, when you're flying up to make a tackle, I don't take those excuses, because I know myself, being in that position, you either reduce the force you're putting into the tackle. You can tackle high and wrap, but you've got to reduce the force. And if a hand slides up, it's a penalty. But when you're coming in with that kind of force, you're risking being in that situation. And he, you know, look, I like Owen Farrell a lot, because I think I love the steel, the strength he has, the power, and the type of player he is. He's a guy you'd love to play with. He's a fellow who, when you're in the trenches, he's the one who's going to stand up and be counted, and he does that. And he's a very physical player, and he's like his dad playing rugby league. He's a hard bastard, you know, and he's very, 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 very physical. But you've got to be careful, and he's been at this for a while. These high shots, and you know, that one was a really bad one. But he's going to get a suspension, and he's a huge loss for Saracens when they play Leinster on Saturday week.
Yeah, he certainly will be. Alan, we just wanted to give a quick mention of something which you were involved with. World Suicide Prevention Day is this Thursday, September 10th, and it's a day marked to honour those who have lost their lives to suicide. Cycle Against Suicide are calling on everyone to unite in empathy, encouragement, hope and support. They want people to team up with them in the fight against suicide by joining the Bike for Life MKM Challenge, with the collective aim being to take to our bikes and cycle in excess of 1 million kilometres. It's a virtual cycle. You can cycle anytime, anywhere. For more information and to register, go to cycleagainstsuicide.com. Alan, great stuff this morning. Thanks, Minnie, for taking the call. We'll chat to you again on Friday.